Good evening to all of you. I hope you are all doing good. May God bless you all. May you have a lot of blessings from God, good health, happiness, peace, and everything. Yesterday's live streaming, we finished the discussion of the play. We read the play from scene 1 to scene 8. And of course, we had a very detailed discussion of the text. Today, we will discuss the most important themes of the play, The Emperor Jones. So, before discussing the themes of the play, let us just discuss the importance of the title of the play, The Emperor Jones. I will just start the lecture. After maybe 1 minute, I just need to make some preparations. Just 1 second. So let us just review whatever we discussed the other day. We have seen the scenes, all the 8 scenes, and we know that the Emperor job of Emperor Jones was very effective because of the story of the silver bullet, and he could easily control the natives of the island with his story of the silver bullet. And in the 8 scenes, we saw what happens to the Emperor Jones, and he was, of course, being very rude, and he is rewarded for his misuse of power, and with the very silver bullet, the natives just he'll kill him. Of course, it's a play which is a blending of expressionism and realism. And now let us just look at the title of the play, The Emperor Jones. So before analyzing the very title, The Emperor Jones, let's discuss what are the features of good title. We have to understand. Of course, we are just going to substantiate the fact that the title, The Emperor Jones, is a very good title. But before that, we have to understand what are the features of good titles. So a good title should indicate the contents of the play, just as a signboard indicates the goods that are sold in a shop. So maybe when we say that a good title is something like a signboard, okay, it sells. A signboard tells us about, right, the very products of a shop, or maybe a whatever is, of course, in a shop, or maybe an office. So just like that, a good title tells us what the play is, and in that case we can say that the Emperor Jones, what is the Emperor Jones about? The Emperor Jones is about this play is about the story of Emperor Jones. Hence we can say that it's a good title. So O'Neill first intended to entitle the play. Eugene O'Niell wanted to entitle the play Silver Bullet, The Silver Bullet. But later, upon second thought, he changed his mind, and he gave the title The Emperor Jones. And the play, or rather, the play is titled after the protagonist, and we can say that it is, of course, a very good title, because the title of the play is the name of the protagonist, and the play is about the life, the career, and the tragic death of Jones, and hence we can say that the title is very, very appropriate. And now Now we come to, of course, the uh, further discussion of the title. So the the Emperor John's is the pivot of action, or rather the drama. All the incidents of the drama revolve around Emperor John's. So we can say that John's is John's is, of course, the center of the action. John's is the pivot of the action. The action of the play revolves around Brutus John's. That's very, very important. The play opens one afternoon of a crucial day in the career of John's, and it ends with his tragic death at the dawn of the next day. Throughout the play, attention is focused on John's. In scene one, through a dialogue between John's and Smithers, the white trader, we come to know about the past of John's. We are told that he is a Negro who worked as a Pullman porter in the States for a number of years. There, he acquired the career of, in fact, he became he had a lot of experience in the West, especially he knew what is life in the West, and he had he acquired the veneer of Western civilization, but he failed to control his animal instincts and impulses, which came to the surface at the least provocation. And thus he committed two murders and was jailed for life, but he broke out from the prison and made good escape to an island in the West Indian islands, rather in one of the islands of West Indies. Now, it's the Emperor John's who is the center of the legend of the silver bullet. On reaching the island, he is able to impress the inhabitants. We have to understand the fact that the inhabitants of the island are simple, ignorant, illiterate, and within 2 years, he has a total control of the inhabitants of the island, and he amassed huge wealth in a foreign bank. Once Lem, the tribal chief, tried to kill him by shooting him at point blank, and luckily he was not killed, and he used the incident to great advantage to create the myth that he bore a charmed life and he can be killed only by a silver bullet. And in order to make his story all the more convincing, he made silver bullets, and he carried the silver bullets, and he intended to shoot himself with a silver bullet if the circumstances made it necessary. So the superstitious natives fully believed the story of Emperor John's, and we can say that the title of the play is very, very suitable. All right, now we have to look at, we say that we are going to substantiate the fact that the title of the play, The Emperor John's, is really appropriate, and it's really suitable because the play is about the life of Emperor John's. It's about the different characteristics, different personal traits of the hero, the protagonist, Emperor John's. It's about his lust for money. It's about his craze for power. It's about his selfishness. It's about his cruelty. It's about his opportunism. It's about his brutality. And it's about his murder of innocent people. Okay, so let's discuss the lust of John's for money. Johns is not interested in playing the role of an emperor. It's not the glamour of kingship which he craves for. He lusts only for money. Moreover, he knows that the natives would soon revolt against him, and he was carefully planned out. In fact, he was, of course, very, very sure about the revolt of the natives, and he carefully arranged future course of his of action. The future course of action, he would escape through the great forest which is close by, and the purpose he had hidden some food under the white stone and has carefully familiarized himself with the route he intends to take. Crossing the forest, he would reach the sea coast where he would be quite safe from his revolting subjects. Then he would freely and comfortably live on the wealth he has already amassed. The scene one shows that he is intelligent, crafty, proud, self-confident, and far-sighted. Okay, that's about John's lust for money. And now, okay, we continue our discussion of the title of the play, The Emperor John's, and now we have to just discuss John's hallucinations and regression. So this play is also about regression. Okay, so it's just going back. It is about the past of John's. So on the afternoon of the day on which the play opens, the natives are already in revolt against him. Johns runs away according to his plan. Scene 2 and scene 2 to 7, which follow, are sustained pieces of monologue. The speaker being the runaway Emperor Johns. Throughout, the attention is focused on Jones, and the monologue is expressive of what is happening in his soul or psyche. He has illusions or hallucinations, which are objectifications of his racial, personal memories. Thus, the shapeless figures of nameless spheres which he sees at the edge of the forest are symbolic of the fear complex within him. He also sees the vision of Jeff, a Negro whom he had killed. It is in fact an externalization of his guilt complex. Similar is the vision of his fellow prisoners and the prison guard whom he had killed. The vision of the auction in the slave market, the visions of the slave ship and of the Congo witch doctor, the altar, and the crocodile god are so many externalizations of his racial memories, or what Jung calls the collective unconscious. So whatever we see in the play, in scenes like scene 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the regression, or according to Jungian psychology, the collective unconscious of Emperor Jones. And now, at the end of each scene, Jones fires his revolver, and he at last he fires his revolver, and the hallucination comes to an end. The last bullet, the silver bullet, is fired at the crocodile god. In each scene, John strips himself of some part of his emperorhood. That's very, very significant. He is just giving up some part of his emperorhood in each of the inner scenes, scene number 2 to 7. So the last bullet, the silver bullet, is fired at the crocodile god, and of course, with that, he has failed completely. Now let's look at his tragic end, the tragic end of the Emperor John's. Okay, so in the last scene of the play, John's again is the center of attention. The beating of tom-tom strikes terror into his soul. He becomes panicky, forgets the route, and takes a circular course. The result is that he returns to the edge of the forest where he had begun his last journey and where his enemies are waiting to kill him. He is killed by a silver bullet, which the natives had molded for the purpose. And the play is entirely concerned with John's life, career, and death. His past, his present, his hopes and fears, his aspirations and machinations, his pride and greed, his racial consciousness and hallucinations, both his external and internal, are explored. Hence, from the thematic, structural, characterization point of view, the title of the play is quite suitable. John's is the emperor with a distinction. He is superior both to the English trader Smithers and to the other natives on whom he rules. Even he lives like a king. He is killed not by an ordinary bullet, but the silver bullet. Thus, he is able to preserve the legend he had created. Hence, both in his life and death, he is the emperor. This is very, very important. He told the natives that he can be killed by only a silver bullet. He molded a silver bullet for that purpose, and the natives also makes silver bullet for that purpose, and at last he is being killed by the silver bullet. The title of the play is also a fine instance of O'Niell's use of irony. The full name of the hero of the play is Brutus Jones. Jones is every man, and Brutus implies the irrational brute in every man. That's very, very important. It's ironical that a mere brute, an irrational animal, should be the emperor. John's death is pathetic and ironic rather than tragic. Now, we have just substantiate fact that the title, The Emperor John's, is very, very appropriate. And now we have to continue our discussion, and we move on to, of course, the discussion of the themes of the play. So let us just look at the important themes of the play right now. Okay, so we understand that the play is about a variety of themes. It's about, of course, different themes. Say, for example, it's about the conflict between good and evil. And it is also about the Negro tragedy. Another theme of this play is the Negro tragedy. So that is again very, very important. Okay, so one of the themes is the Negro tragedy, and that is so significant. All right, so now we will discuss all the themes one by one. So first, okay, the Emperor John's is a complex and rich work of art. It's a very rich work of art. It's a wonderful drama, and a lot of performances of the play took place in the past. It's included in the syllabus of many of the universities of the world for PG, for UG, and for other courses of the English language. Again, this play is included, and it is one of the best works. It's a complex and rich work of art. It has no simple, one simple theme. It's just a very simple theme. It has, of course, not just one simple theme. It has many themes. That's what very important. It has a simple theme, but maybe when we look at this play, we see that maybe it's about the lust of an emperor. Maybe it is about, of course, the cruelty of one emperor, the misuse of power, but we can say that it is also about multiplicity of themes. Say that is the reason why it has been variously interpreted by various critics. That's very important. So it's about the failure, it's about the fall, it's about the tragedy of Emperor John's, but critics say that it's about variety of themes. Okay, so a number of themes and ideas have been found prominent in the play: the shedding of false masks and attainment of self-knowledge, fall of man through proud spiritual regression and disintegration of a terror-stricken soul, the primitive forces influence and working on man, criticism of Western civilization, and the racial theme of the Negro are some of the prevalent theories about the theme of the Ember John. So we have the themes like the shedding of false mask, attainment of self-knowledge, then again disintegration and regression of terror-stricken soul, primitive forces influence and working on man, criticism of Western civilization. Okay, then the Negro theme as such. These are all the themes of the play The Emperor Jones. Now let us just discuss reenactment of the Negro tragedy. Negro tragedy is again another theme of the play. Let us just discuss the reenactment of the Negro tragedy. The play is the enactment of John's fears about the ill treatment of the Negroes in the USA. This is very important. So it is Emperor John's. The play is the enactment of John's fears about the ill treatment of Negroes in the United States of America. The play on the surface deals with the life of a Negro who becomes an emperor and later on is rooted by the natives because he is a Negro. Thus, racial discrimination is the theme of the play. But it is not easy to define the meaning of the play or to explain what exactly the Negro's terrified journey through the forest means. In other words, the theme of the play is the shedding of false masks acquired by the black man through his association with the white man and of his return to his primitive home. In this way, the Emperor John's is a study in spiritual regression. Okay, and now another theme of this play is fall of man through pride. Okay, so maybe when you look at many plays or literary works, we can see this theme, fall of man through pride. If you look at the Shakespearean play, the King Lear, of course, it's about the fall of man through pride. Similarly, if you look at the play or no, the novel of The Old Man and the Sea of Ernest Hemingway, we can understand that that is also about the pride of the old man Hemingway. So we can say that the theme of this play, The Emperor John's, is also fall of man through pride. Another theme of the play is the fall of man through pride. The sin of pride is responsible for the fall of Brutus and O'Neill hero in other plays too. Man commits a fatal error when he realizes on his conscious ego too much in order to fulfill his needs without acknowledging the power of the unconscious. Hence, the unconscious is viewed by O'Neill as the equivalent of the Greek gods. His play seems to preach the moral that for happiness, man must find the golden mean between humility and pride, reconciling the unconscious needs with the conscious ones. And another theme of this play is attainment of self knowledge. A play is a study of self awareness. This play, The Emperor Jones, is definitely a study in self-awareness. O'Neill's heroes attain this self-knowledge at the cost of the play, and the consequences are often ironical or tragic. The gradual disintegration of John's conscious ego, the revelation of his personal and collective unconscious, and his flight from himself constitute the main theme. John's harrowing run in the jungle is a flight from self and eventually a journey towards self understanding. According to the critic Doris V. Falk, John's hopeless flight through the forest is not from the natives at all, but from himself, the fundamental self from which he is, his blind pride and its self-image have so long separated him, and which inevitably comes into its own. The progress of John's is a progress in self-understanding till one by one his affectations drop off and he finds his real self. He retreats from the symbols of civilized success which he had won for himself to fantasies of primitive terror which lie deep within. And this play, The Emperor Jones, is a study of heredity and environment. According to S.K. Winter, uh, we understand that this play is a study of heredity and environment. In the forest, the forces of heredity and environment crowd in upon the consciousness of the Emperor Jones until he loses his regal nature and tears away the trappings of his assumed grandeur. One by one, they disappear, and as he becomes more and more naked, he becomes more and more a Negro criminal tortured by primitive fears of the dark. In the end, he loses the battle, conquered, but not by the physical strength of the natives, for they did not even change their position. All they did while John circled widely through the forest was to beat their drums. He was destroyed by the forces of his past. It was not the natives that barred his way to freedom. It was the strong medicine of his Negro heritage. And now the Emperor Jones is about the modern civilization. This play is a critique on the modern civilization. And now let us discuss the theme of indictment of modern civilization. Emperor Jones as an indictment of modern civilization. According to a critic, Edwin Engel, the Emperor Jones is the story of the failure of science and materialism to supply a substitute for the withered God. In John's character, we find a sharp criticism of modern materialistic civilization. John sees Negro only in appearance. He has none of the characteristic commonly associated with the Negro, such as laziness or lack of initiative. By outlook and training, is an American white man. During the 10 years in which he had served as Pullman porter, he acquired the white man's cynicism, shrewdness, efficiency, selfishness, and cupidity. All his actions are motivated by a greed for self and money. Jones tells me this. You didn't pose I was holding down this emperor job for the glory in it, did you? They wants the big circus show for their money. I gives it to them and I gets the money. Another characteristic that John shares with the white man is his utilitarian attitude towards religion. He feigns faith in both the Baptist church and the witch doctors of the island. He is a highly shrewd and cunning man, but his shallow materialistic groundings fail to save him from the ultimate doom. The white culture in the island is ultimately thrown away by the Negroid culture. Abramow, the critic, asserts the Ember Jones is the tragedy of the outcast, whom capitalist civilization has excluded from society. And Edwin Engel, in his book, The Haunted Heroes of Eugene O'Niell, also says that the play is a criticism of the capitalist civilization of the white man. According to M. Manuel, the basic theme of the Ember Jones is a satire on the Western man. And now, another theme of the play is racial consciousness of the Ember Jones, or rather, racial consciousness is the theme of the play, the Ember Jones. Let's just discuss this theme, the racial consciousness. In the Ember Jones, the dramatist has also made use of Carl Jung's theory of the racial unconscious or the collective unconscious. This opinion is held by critic Doris V. Falk. According to the Jungian theory, man's mind contains ideas from the collective unconscious which come to him simply by virtue of his membership in the human race, as well as ideas inherited from his specific race, tribe, and family. His mind contains, in addition, unconscious ideas and symbols arising from his unique personal situation to make up the structure of his personal unconscious. Finally, from this personal unconscious emerges his own consciousness, his ego. The play is a record of the gradual breaking down of John's conscious ego and the revelation of his personal and collective unconscious. The first two visions of Jeff and of the prison guard proceed from his personal unconscious, but later hallucinations proceed from a racial memory. For Johns had never actually undergone the traumatic experience of being auctioned as a slave, nor had he a direct knowledge of a Congo witch doctor. Yet, under the influence of fear, when his veneer of culture is not there to protect him, his racial unconscious projects frightening visions and completely subjugates his conscious mind. Using Jungian theory of the collective unconscious, Eugene O'Niell reveals the persistence of the past in man's future on the earth. Also, the frequent reference to race differences at first lead us to think that the play is concerned with the encounter of the races, as are other plays of O'Niell like The Dreamy Kid and All Gods Chillum Get Wings. Johns is always conscious of the fact that though he is a Negro, he is not only far above the Negroes of the island, but even above Smithers, the white man. Smithers cannot bear the thought that he has to be subservient to a black man, even when he knows that Johns is a better man. In spite of the emphasis that race consciousness gets in the play is not on race problems. Rather, the play presents a confrontation of the races to establish the point that underneath the surface differences of color, man is the same everywhere. Smithers has seen the inside of prisons as Jones has. They both speak a type of the English language which is indicative of the moral corruption of society. Only at one level, the more obvious level, is the theme of the play, the regression of a Negro from a state of civilization to primitive savagery. The real subject of the play is the tumbling down, not particularly of a Negro, but of a man, and especially of a Western man, from a state of unstable culture equilibrium to earlier stages of savagery. Smithers appears in the play not merely as a foil to Jones, but as an essential figure in the dramatization of cultural degeneration. Smithers is the degenerate white man, whereas Emperor Brutus Jones is the ironic embodiment of the ethical and religious values of Western society, which worship success. Another theme of the play The Emperor Jones is the conflict of good and evil. According to critic Frederick I. Carpenter, the fundamental themes of the play are those of human life itself, the eternal conflict of good and evil, of sunlight and moonlight, of civilization and savagery, of the clearing and of the great forests. Thus, the play has not one theme, but a variety of themes. It's a rich work of art, rich in meaning, in message, and motivation. It's also rich in images and symbols. The themes have been presented through expressionism and through a blend of expressionism with realism. Okay, now we move on to the another topic, that is plot construction in The Emperor Jones. We are discussing the plot of the play The Emperor Jones. Eugene O'Niell was following expressionistic technique in The Emperor Jones. Out of the 8 scenes, the middle 6 scenes are set in expressionism. Although expressionistic plays generally are weak in plots, in fact, their formlessness is quite obvious. But The Emperor Jones is an experiment in blending realism and expressionism. Hence, the skill in constructing the plot of The Emperor Jones is amazing. According to critic M. Manuel, the skill of Jones is very much there in the construction of the scenes, all the 8 scenes, scene 1 to scene 8. It will be difficult to match a first scene from any other play with the first scene of The Emperor Jones. The point in the story at which O'Niell sends the curtain up is chosen with unerring theatrical sense. The play opens with a physical struggle between the old Negro woman trying to slink away from the palace of Jones and Smithers, who holds her by force. In the few lines of dialogue between the old woman and Smithers, we are plunged into not only the middle of things, but into the very beginning of the end of John's story. In the exchanges that follow between Jones and Smithers, the whole story of Jones is unfolded little by little. The dialogue throughout the scene is crisp and vigorous. The dramatic tension generated by the confrontation of two widely different characters like Smithers and Jones, along with the reversal of the traditional positions of the white man and the Negro, provides most exciting drama. The clever, subtle way in which The first scene anticipates and leads up to the scenes following is remarkable. What happens in first scene makes the strange experiences of John's in the next seven scenes dramatically inevitable and psychologically convincing. In the course of the conversation with Smithers, Johns recalls the two fateful incidents of his life which have made him a fugitive from the law, namely the murder of Jeff, the Negro Pullman porter, and the white prison guard. In scenes 3 and 4, Johns is haunted by visions of these incidents and he tries to shoot his way through them with diabolic malice. Smithers constantly tries to trifle the self confidence of Johns. Of the 8 scenes in the play, the first and last scenes are realistic in the manner of O'Neill's early plays, and the 6 middle scenes are expressionistic, consisting of monologues of Johns, interspersed with descriptions of the great forest, which forms the setting of the play, and which is almost an over character in it. Like Hardy's Egdon Heathen in The Return of the Native, it influences both characters and action. The patterning of the scenes is both careful and deliberate. As mentioned by Edwin Engel, O'Neill achieved a remarkable concentration of dramatic power by means of several unifying effects. After the first scene, the action occurs between dusk of one afternoon and dawn on the following day in or on the edge of the great forest. The successive episodes are synchronized with John's revolver, the chamber of which contains approximately as many cartridges as there are scenes. That's very important. Okay, so we have 6 bullets, 6 inner scenes as well. As the gun is discharged, the scenes changes. Okay, and now that's very very important. As the gun is discharged, the scene changes, approaching the point where the 6th bullet, the silver one, coincides with the complete reversion to savagery. The beating tom-tom, like the steamer's whistle in Bound East for Cardiff, also serves as an important unifying factor, symbolizing as it does the pervasive and inescapable presence of the primitive. Together with the revolver, it governs the inexorable movement towards the primeval, spatially and temporarily. That is the tom-tom, the sound of the beating of the drums by the inhabitants. For the tom-tom beats in the camp of the bush niggers, to which Johns is helplessly drawn, and it beats in John's body, representing the primitive blood which charges through his arteries, beginning at a rate corresponding to the normal pulse beat and only faintly heard. It becomes perceptibly louder and more rapid as Johns becomes increasingly terror-stricken, as his visions are regressively aboriginal, as he approaches the camp of the bush niggers. When he is finally killed with a silver bullet, the tom-tom instantly ceases. An additional source of unity is to be found in the character of the play itself throughout the 6 middle scenes. For here it becomes a monodrama, the action of which occurs within the infected mind of the single character, the protagonist, the action of which occurs within the mind of the Emperor Johns. reminding one not only of the appearance of three dead men in where the cross is made, but of the grotesque dreams of Flaubert's Saint Anthony, the visions of Hauptmann's Fable Henniel, Strindberg's excruciating dream, the hideous phantasms in Andrew's The Black Masters. The phantoms which torment the frenzied Johns exert upon him an inescapable and compulsive effect. As he impotently struggles against them, he fires the revolver, thereby obliterating the scene and releasing himself from one nightmare experience only to move on to another. In the Emperor John's, the objectification of the contents of the character's haunted mind functions as a protracted symbol of fate in the shape of the biological past. The madness of the fear obsessed Johns demonstrate that man is the sum not only of his own past experiences but also those of his race, a notion that is based upon the assumption of a physical as well as physical continuity between ancestor and descendant. For this conception, O'Neill appears to have been indebted to Jack London, who, by means of what Weisman terms germplasm, had found a way to account for the existence of racial memories in his atavistic brain, memories of the whole evolution of the race. Now, let's discuss the hero of the Emperor John's. We come to another topic, that is the hero of the Emperor John's. The hero of the Emperor John's is a remarkable creation of Eugene O'Niell. He has attained a stature and is a person of some magnitude. He has not been involved in any physical conflict. It's through his own egotism and pride, through his exploitation of the natives, that he has provoked a revolution. His own hubris have brought about his downfall. But the main interest lies in following his mental reactions, his cogitations, and imaginary fears. Brutus Johns resembles the heroes of the Greek tragedies insofar as his own pride and egotism have antagonized him with others, and he wishes to belong to the universal order. Like other tragic heroes, Brutus Johns also has his epiphany, or the moment of the self-realization. But O'Neill's hero is the 20th century character involved in conflict with himself. According to Doris Falk, an O'Neill protagonist is not compelled to make choices between alternate actions in order to accomplish another action. He must make a choice between the alternate images of the self in order to discover the real self, which he often fails to do. Certainly, he performs acts. If nothing else, he antagonizes other characters who are engaged in their own search for self. And it is this conflict that many of O'Neill's plays consist of. But the conflict with others is only a byproduct of the protagonist's conflict with himself. He must solve that, must find his integrated self before he can engage unpurposeful action. Thus, O'Neill's heroes are engrossed in their conflict with self-images and real images. They must realize their true self from which they have been removed. They must, in this process, they clash with other characters. Brutus Johns is after the realization of his real self. Now, Doris Falk, further comparing characters in Aristotle and O'Neill, points out that in Aristotle, the character reveals a moral purpose. But in the case of O'Neill's heroes, there is the ethos or moral purpose of the character to perpetuate and strengthen an illusion about himself. Thus, every hero, including Brutus Jones, has created a self-image which he regards as the real image, but it runs against his real image or self. The false image causes hatred of the self, and this impels him to run after something illusory, and this is the hero's hubris. Brutus John's self-image is born of his pride and dishonest, unscrupulous ways. There is a portrayal of this pride in the Greek tragedies which provokes gods to hurl down the hero. O'Neill's hero has neurotic pride which entails his suffering and doom. Brutus Jones is not an Aristotelian hero. Aristotle laid down that the hero of a tragedy must be an exceptional individual, a man of high rank, a king or a prince, so that his fall from his former greatness would arouse the tragic emotions of pity and fear. All Shakespeare's heroes fulfill this requirement, but Jones, the central figure in the play, is not a hero in the Aristotelian sense. He is a crook with a shady criminal past who freely exploits the natives and by his superior cunning becomes their emperor within 2 years. No doubt he is superior to the natives in intelligence, but he is entirely lacking in that nobility and greatness of soul which the tragic hero should have. Pride is the fatal flaw in John's character. His pride makes him contemptuous of the natives over whom he rules, of the laws which he himself has made, and of his role as an emperor, which he calls a circus show, and which he stages not for love of it, but for the benefit of the ignorant and superstitious Negroes. He is contemptuous even of the white smithers, calls him a petty thief, whom he can put in jail whenever he likes. His is the pride of an upstart, of an adventurer who has freed himself from the shackles of poverty and slavery and risen high from a low and mean position. His is the pride of the lower instincts, which makes him copy the worst faults of the whites who had held him in terror and bondage for so many years. He is like the enslaved mankind to whom Prometheus had taught the use of fire. His first instinct is to despise all those who are still in bondage, to turn traitor to his own people and to enslave them, as himself had been enslaved by superior knowledge and trickery of the whites. He is symbolic of all those who suddenly find themselves freed from old chains and use their freedom to despise and destroy others, of all the snobs and new rich of the world. John's pride and arrogance make him a tyrant. He exploits the natives and extorts money from them, till the repression becomes intolerable and they rise against him in revolt. Their revolt is the direct outcome of his pride and wrongdoing. He knew that the natives were bound to revolt against him sooner or later and had carefully planned his escape from the island. On the fateful day, he ran away from the palace with great self-confidence, but to no avail. He is ultimately killed by the natives with a silver bullet, the symbol of his pride and greed. Thus, it is his pride that is responsible for his downfall and death. But he is not fully purged of his pride because it is a silver bullet alone that has killed him. So his death is not cathartic as in Aristotelian sense. He's not purged of his faults. The dramatist is more interested in the inner side of John's rather than in his outer self. Throughout the six forest scenes, attention is focused on what is happening to the soul of Emperor Johns. He has hallucinations and sees his victims one after another. He sees Jeff and the prison guard, both of whom he had murdered in a fit of rage or anger. O'Niell goes even deeper into the unconscious of Johns. His racial memories crowd in upon him, and he has visions of the slave auctions, of the galley slaves, and finally of the Congo witch doctor swaying and casting his spell. His spiritual disintegration and regression is total by the end of scene 7, and the real interest of the play lies in the internal action, in the psyche of the hero. O'Niell has not exalted his hero. He has reversed the tragic process. Instead of going up the spiritual ladder, Johns goes down. The regression of Brutus Johns is akin to Lear's stripping, but Lear gains spiritually what he loses psychologically. Instead of revealing the nobility and grandeur of the human soul, Emperor Johns shows that man is essentially a beast, and we find that his progress in civilization has made him a bundle of nerves. Now we discuss another theme that is, of course, a very important theme: collective unconscious in the Emperor Johns. Let's discuss the theme collective unconscious in the Emperor Johns. This is very important topic. The Emperor Johns is a clever piece of psychoanalysis. It's an expressionistic play in which the psychological or inner reality is the subject matter. In the expressionistic drama, the playwright uses effectively to express internal action, dreams, visions, aspirations, desires, emotions, and the like. The technique of interior monologue or dramatic monologue, the device of the monologue, the speech of an individual to himself, is thus used to express the soul or psyche of a character, both by the stream of consciousness novelists and expressionistic dramatists. O'Niell has used it in his plays very effectively and successfully. The play was written under an impact of the theories of modern psychologists like Sigmund Freud, Bergson, and Carl Jung. To illustrate in particular Jung's concept of collective consciousness, that is, the past of a person influences his present and future. The mind of a given man contains ideas from the collective unconscious which come to him simply by virtue of his membership in the human race, as well as ideas inherited from his own specific race, tribe, and family. His mind contains, in addition, unconscious ideas and symbols arising from his unique personal situation to make up the structure of his personal unconscious. Finally, from his personal unconscious emerges his own consciousness, his ego. So, by collective unconscious, Jung means one's racial memories which lie buried deep in the unconscious. By personal unconscious, he means memories of one's own past actions, particularly memories of one's sins and evil doings, and then there is the personal conscious or ego of the individual. In the play, O'Niell has shown how the ego or self of Emperor Johns breaks down under the impact of terror. and how his personal and racial memories crowd in upon him cause disintegration of his ego or personal consciousness. It's in this way that the past of John's determines his present and leads to his decay and undoing. The Ember John's is a record of the gradual breaking down of Brutus John's conscious ego and the revelation of his personal and collective unconscious. The first two visions of Jeff and the prison guard proceed from his personal unconscious, but the later hallucinations proceed from a racial memory, for Johns had never actually undergone the traumatic experience of being auctioned as a slave, nor had he a direct knowledge of any Congo witch doctor. Yet, under the influence of fear, when his veneer of culture is not there to protect him, his racial unconscious projects frightening visions and completely subjugates his conscious mind. The sin of pride seen in all tragic heroes had a particular meaning for O'Neill and Hume. Man commits a fatal error when he relies on his conscious ego too much in order to fulfill his needs, with acknowledging the power of the unconscious. Hence, the unconscious is viewed by O'Neill as the equivalent of Greek gods. His play seems to preach the moral that for happiness man must find golden mean between humility and pride, reconciling the unconscious needs with the conscious ones. Self-knowledge is something that all should strive for. O'Neill's protagonist seemed very much like Shakespeare's Lear, who but slenderly knew himself. They move towards self-discovery painfully and arrive at it just before the end. John's, like Lear, is slowly stripped of all lendings to become unaccommodated man. The gradual disintegration of his conscious ego, the revelation of his personal and collective unconscious, and his flight from himself, the fundamental self from which his blind pride and its self-image have so long separated him, and which inevitably comes into its own, constitute the dramatic movement. Now we discuss another very important theme or topic, that is the use of interior monologue in the Ember John's. The Ember John's is, as we know, a blending of expressionism and realism, and expressionistic technique of Eugene O'Niell is becoming very effective in this play as a result of the use of the interior monologue. Interior monologue we have in novel, we have in short story, and interior monologue is in drama as well. And whatever we see in scenes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in the Ember John's is interior monologue. Let's discuss the topic of the use of interior monologue in the Ember John's right now. The technique of interior monologue means the use of speech of a character to himself. He himself is the speaker and listener. He uses this device to open his mind, to reveal his inner being, his dreams and desires, fears and anxieties, his aspirations and emotions. Since the Ember John's is a psychological drama or expressionistic play, the dramatist has used the technique of the interior monologue very effectively and successfully. Device is used to express the soul or psyche of a character, the Emperor Brutus John's. The forest scenes sustain monologues. The first scene and the last scene of the play consist of realistic dialogue in the best manner of O'Neill, but the central 6 scenes, scene 2 to 7, which take place at night in the forest, are sustained pieces of the interior monologue of John's. It's through the use of monologue that we have been given a peep into the terror-stricken, anguished soul of Brutus Jones. A brief analysis of these forest scenes shows a step-by-step spiritual disintegration and regression of the erstwhile emperor. In these scenes, he is seen continuously talking to himself as visions from his personal past of crime and evil doing, as well as from his racial past crowding upon him. Scene 2, Vision of Nameless Fears. In scene 2, we find John's in the grip of an extremely intensified fear complex. He is continuously talking to himself in order to get rid of the nervousness and fear to which he has become subject owing to the woods and the threatening beat of the tom-tom. He has mistaken the route which he should have taken, and when he looks for the white stones where he had hidden his food, he finds that they have disappeared. This makes him even more nervous, and the strain of his strenuous journey of 3 hours begins to tell upon him. Finally, he is overcome by hunger and has the horrifying hallucinatory vision of the little formless spheres squirming upon towards him. Throughout this period, except for this hallucinatory vision, which is a figment of his overwrought mind, Johns is alone on the stage, and the nervous fear of which he is the victim of is conveyed to the audience in a dramatic manner with the help of his monologue. Scene 3, Vision of Jeff. In scene 3, we have retrospective dramatic monologue in which Johns imagines that he is seeing the ghostly figure of the Negro, Jeff, whom he had killed in a quarrel over a game of dice. This figure is nothing but a hallucinatory apparition conjured by the overwrought brain of Johns. He addresses it directly and tries to talk to it. Finally, not finding any response, he gets nervous and fires at the apparition with furious anger. The moment the smoke clears away, he finds that he is alone in the forest. Scene 4, Vision of the Prison Guard. In scene 4, we find a completely exhausted and miserable Johns, the erstwhile emperor. He tears away the frippery emperor trappings from his body. It makes him feel lighter. Throughout, he continues talking to himself in a wild fashion. The things which he keeps seeing have made him absolutely nervous. He tries to reassure himself that there are no such things and tells himself, "You just seeing them things cause your belly is empty and you sick with hunger inside." Almost immediately after this, he has another hallucinatory vision and prays loud to Lord Jesus. His guilty conscience makes him see the vision that white prison guard who had whipped him across the back and whom he had killed in a fit of anger. The whole scene is reenacted on the stage of his mind. The impression is so vivid that he actually gets into the posture of striking the guard. Just as he feels sure he has caught him, he realizes with sudden horror that his hands are empty. He shouts with baffled, terrified rage, tugging frantically at his revolver. He addresses the figure of the guard directly and fires point blank at his back. Immediately, the whole vision is blotted out and John stands alone in darkness. Scene 5, Vision of the auction scene. In scene 5, as the night advances, John through the forest becomes more and more tormented. His morale has sunk and his loss of courage is no longer kept up. In anguish, he sits and mourns, raising to Lord Jesus the desperate cry of a poor sinner and asserting that the Lord preserve me from them horns. But his words lack conviction as his faith is not deep enough. As the primitive jungle tightens its grip over John's, he throws away his shoes, adding truthfully, Emperor, you see getting mighty low. The hallucination that John's has in the scenes is not the projection of his own unconscious, it is the first Jungian thought that O'Neill provides in the play for the auction scene set in a southern state of America is part of John's collective unconscious. It is part of the racial memory of the Negroes, what Jung calls collective unconscious. Now, scene 6 and 7, the vision of the galley slaves, that is the slave ship, slaves on the slave ship. The hallucinatory visions presented in scenes 6 and 7 are two of the greatest triumphs of the modern psychoanalysis and law of mental association. The first of these visions makes John feel that he has already been sold as a slave and he finds himself on board a galley where he is plying at the oars like a common galley slave. The pathetic wail of the slaves in which John also joins is symbolic of the bottomless pit of despair into which he has fallen. It's not possible for a man to descend lower than this. He has lost all his hopes of being saved and has turned into a perfect wreck. In this scene, we find the combination of dramatic monologue and pantomime. Congo witch doctor and the crocodile. Finally, the unconscious associations in John's mind carry him to the original home of his ancestors, into the dark and dreadful jungles of Africa, where in a horrifying vision he joins the crooning and dancing of the Congo witch doctor, who by a gesture seems to tell him that he must offer himself as a sacrifice in order to appease an angry god. Then the huge head of a crocodile, which with wide open jaws, appears on stage, and John's, hypnotized by the fascinating glare of its green eyes, moves towards it with deliberately slow steps, all the time praying to Lord Jesus to have mercy on him. Then all of a sudden, the spell is broken, and coming out of his trance, John fires at the crocodile. Immediately, the whole vision disappears, and John lies with fear flat on the ground, his arms outstretched, whimpering as the throb of the tom-tom fills the silence about him, and a somber pulsation, a baffled but revengeful power. Throughout these scenes, John is alone on stage. All these 6 scenes are sustained pieces of dramatic monologue. Through these monologues of the ex-emperor, his tortured and anguished soul is laid bare before the readers. They are clever pieces of psychoanalysis such as had never before been presented on American stage. Throughout, we are concerned with what is passing in the mind of John's. Our involvement in his spiritual plight is total. Okay, now we have to move on to the discussion of another topic, that is symbolism in the Emperor John's. It's a very important topic, symbolism in the Emperor John's. We will discuss it right now. Let's understand what symbol and what we mean by symbolism first, and thereafter we will discuss symbolism in the play The Emperor John's. Okay, let us look at the word symbol. All right, yeah, somebody is just messaging. How is your life going on? It is in fact, yeah, I'm fine and I'm quite happy. Thank you, Shikari Gaming. Okay, so in fact, thanks for your message. Thanks for your comment. I'm fine. Okay, now I will just continue the discussion of the topic symbolism in the Emperor John's. Okay, the word symbol derives from the Greek verb symbolian, meaning to put together, and the related noun symbolon, meaning mark, token, or sign. So the word symbol means mark, token, or sign. So what are the marks? What are the tokens, or what are the signs in the play The Emperor John's, and what do they imply? The term in literary usage refers more specifically to a manner of representation in which what is shown means, by virtue of association, something more or something else. A literary symbol, thank you, thank you. Okay, there is a message. In fact, you doing a great job. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your comment, and your comment is just encouraging me. It is giving me a lot of energy. Thank you very much. Please keep on watching. I will right now continue the discussion of symbolism in the Emperor John's. Okay, so a literary symbol unites an image and an idea. Example, an image of climbing a staircase suggests the idea of raising oneself spiritually. A symbol may be a trope, a simile, a metaphor, a personification, an allegory, an object, a word, or a sign. So all this can be a symbol. Scales, for example, symbolize justice, the rose beauty. Okay, so sometimes even settings, actions, or gestures may be symbolic. Now that's about symbol. So we have, of course, green for something that green is, of course, a symbol in traffic for, of course, continue the journey. Similarly, red is a symbol of danger. So that just like that, of course, we have so many symbols in this play as well. So symbolism as a literary mode or school was announced in a manifesto in the Figaro of 1886 by a group of writers known for 20 years as decadents, to describe a mode of literary expression in which words are used to suggest states of mind rather than for their objective, representational, or intellectual content. So, say, for example, we have the poetry of W.B. Yeats and all. So, Yeats turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. Okay, there we have so much of symbolism. So, turning and turning in the gyre. Gyre is a symbol. The falcon is a symbol. The falcon and the falconer. All right. So, symbolism. And similarly, the movement is an offshoot of Romanticism and Idealism or Neoplatonism. Malame explained symbolism as the art of evoking an object little by little so as to reveal a mood. Okay, in fact, I'm sorry, my Hindi is not very good, so I will continue my explanation in English. Please excuse me. Maybe in future, of course, I'll try to improve English and improve Hindi, and I will try to, of course, explain in Hindi as well. Time being, please excuse me. I'll just continue my explanation in English. Okay, thanks for your comment, because, of course, I understand that if I learn Hindi, of course, I can help more of my listeners. Okay. So thank you. Maybe in future, of course, I will use Hindi. Anyway, both dhanyawad. I will continue my lecture in English right now. The other famous French symbolists were Baudelaire, Verlaine, and Rimbaud, who influenced Yeats, Hume, Pound, and Eliot. The Ideas of the French symbolists were also adopted by the Russian and the American writers. Working as an experimentalist, O'Neill adopted symbolism because, with the help of symbols, he could say more than ordinary speech. The symbols could serve to interpret a theme, to make it acceptable as an escape, to awaken dormant or suppressed experience, as adornment or exhibition. But O'Neill used them time and again to express mental states, dream, visions, and inner experiences. According to Yeats, and also to some extent according to Blake, symbolism deepens the philosophy and enables the artist to grapple with divine reality, and that with the help of symbols, deeper effects can be created and subtler, indefinable shades can be expressed. Okay, so that's about symbolism, and now we will discuss symbolism in this play, The Emperor Jones. In the play The Emperor Jones, the dramatist has externalized the state of mind of Brutus Jones in order to present the past in the present, to reveal the hidden factors of heredity and the regressive traits, and to show man's existence on multiple levels. O'Neill made thoughts more important than deeds by minimizing the external and maximizing the internal action, by giving the scene a symbolic setting, and by making the dialogue suggestively non-realistic and the characters abstract. Through these devices, the inner experience is objectified, the audience is enabled to see the inner picture of things. Indeed, despite a lot of running around, bumping of the heads, and firing of shots on stage, our concern remains mainly with what is passing in John's mind, the setting, the characters, the flight through the forest itself, the tom-tom, the silver bullet, the stone altar, and the tree, the crocodile, etc. in the play have symbolic significance. Now, we are discussing the significance of the symbols one by one. First, the symbolic setting, that is the forest. The setting of the play, The Emperor Jones, is symbolic. The forest, with its sensuous blackness, represents nature, while its primeval terror represents the primitive consciousness. In fact, standing at once for the glory and honor of human freedom, the forest assumes numerous shapes. Example, prison, auction room, ship, altar. The flight through the forest symbolizes psychological regressive flight from one's own self. As mentioned by Doris Falk, the stone altar near the tree combines the sexual and the religious symbols as if to signify the physical and spiritual births are one. John's feeling that he has come to a familiar place indicates symbolically that he has returned to the primitive stage of evolution. And now, evil, which has been his god, appears as a crocodile and demands life. In killing it, therefore, John kills himself. The action starts in the afternoon, which signifies confidence, continues at night, which is the symbol of terror, retrogression, and disintegration, and ends at dawn, which stands for retribution. Now, the symbolic use of characters in the play, The Emperor Jones. The characters in the play are also symbols. Brutus Jones stands for the brute power of man, his animal instincts and impulses. Thus, Brutus Jones is the symbol of every man. He is also a symbol of man's vain boast of power. He, as the Negro, is a symbol of displaced, superstitious humanity, of innocence and violence, of elemental simplicity and primal humanity. His blackness and his African ancestry, his life pattern are of special interest in the play. The madness of the fear-obsessed Johns demonstrates that man is the sum not only of his own past experiences but also those of the race, a notion that is based upon the assumption of a psychical, right, a psychical as well as a physical continuity between ancestor and descendant, loss of his hat, his coat, spurs, boots represents the stripping of the layers of civilization. Now, let us discuss another very important symbol in this play, that is the silver bullet. The Emperor John's is the first of the more imaginative of Eugene O'Niell's plays, in which direct symbolism and fantasy begin to take the place of more realistic characters. Who are only indirectly symbolic. In this play, the silver, it's a play, it's a drama. It's a drama, it's not a novel, it's a drama. In this play, the silver bullet is the symbol of materialism, of that superstition by which the dishonest rich have made the world believe that their very riches could save them from the revenge of their victims. Just as Jones has made the natives believe that he could be killed only by a silver bullet. The silver bullet is also a symbol of the white man's mask under which he wears. It's the symbol of his pride of release from bondage, the fetish of his particular pride. And now the symbolic theme of the play. On the surface, the play is the story of a Negro emperor, his guilty and sinful past, his rise to kingship, his fears and nervousness, and his escape from the aggressive natives, and ultimately his death. But symbolically, the flight represents the soul's attempt to seek salvation and freedom from bondage. According to Doris V. Falk, John's hopeless flight through the forest is not from the natives at all, but from himself, the fundamental self from which his blind pride and his self-image have so long separated him, and which inevitably comes into its own. The progress of John's is progress in self-understanding. It is stripping off the mask of self, layer by layer, just as bit by bit his emperor's uniform is ripped off from his back, until at the end he must confront his destiny himself in nakedness. Now, the significance of the symbol, the sound tom-tom. The beating of the tom-tom is equally symbolic. According to Edwin Engel, the critic, the beating of tom-tom symbolizes the all-pervasive and inescapable presence of the primitive. The tom-tom beats in the camp of the bush niggers, to which John is helplessly drawn, and it beats in John's body, representing the primitive blood which charges through his arteries, beginning at a rate of the normal pulse beat and only faintly heard. It becomes perceptibly louder and more rapid as John's becomes increasingly terror-stricken, as his visions are regressively aboriginal as he approaches the camp of the bush niggers. When he is finally killed with a silver bullet, the tom-tom instantly stops. Now, the symbol of color in the play, the Emperor John's. We see a lot of colors in this play, and let us discuss the significance of color in the play, the Emperor John's. O'Niell has made use of color symbolism in many of his plays, such as Thirst, Warnings, and the Emperor John's. The Emperor's audience chamber has whitewashed walls, a floor of white tiles, and the portico having white pillars. Since Brutus is a Negro, a black man, the white color has both a moral and a racial meaning. Johns has made a spectacular rise by imitating the shrewd and clever ways of white men, both the Americans and the Europeans. But his blackness in the form of his heredity causes his tragedy. In his flight through the forest, he falls into the depths of black forest of his ugly past. It should also be noted that whiteness is also the symbol of death in life. Smithers, John's white imperial existence is nothing but a death in life. And to Smithers, whiteness is the symbol of the tomb. The scarlet color has also its significance in the play. To Johns, it is a symbol of imperial authority, but in fact, it stands for materialism, sinfulness, violence, and blood. Again and again, Smithers makes use of its last meaning by swearing bloody and bleeding. He calls Johns the bleeding nigger. Now, the next important symbol in the play is crocodile. Crocodile is used as a symbol of evil in the play The Ember Johns. Let's discuss the crocodile as a symbol. The crocodile stands for the evil of the self. Doris B. Fox says, from the symbolism of the dance and the use of the silver bullet, we know that the evil represented by the crocodile is the evil of the self. That in killing it, Johns has killed himself. At least that distorted image of the self, which was his life motivation. He has performed the justice demanded by the dance. In this play, The Ember Johns, O'Niell has achieved a remarkable synthesis of symbol and dramatic action of the inward and the outward. Brutus Johns emerges as a gigantic universal figure whose terror strives. We are all involved in his fate. Brutus Johns symbolizes the irrational and brutish in every man. The silver bullet is the symbol of his pride, and it also stands for worldly wealth and greed for money. The dark and the dense forest symbolizes the inner darkness and confusion of Johns. His escape through the forest is symbolic of his escape from his own self, from the memories of his criminal past. His stripping himself off layer by layer is symbolic of his regression to his racial past. Even the tom-tom symbolizes the heartbeats, but the symbolism aspect has been mixed with realism to make the play concrete and more acceptable. The past and the present are fused. There is an extended use of interior monologue. Expressionism has been blended with realism. And now we just move on to the next topic, that is Expressionism in the Ember Johns. The topic, the Expressionism. This play is, of course, an expressionistic play, and we are discussing a very important topic, Expressionism in the Ember Johns. Let us discuss this topic right now. So, what is Expressionism? Expressionism is a revolt and protest against society. In drama, it's a technique that lays emphasis on inner reality or stream of consciousness. The inner reality is communicated through various devices such as masks, asides, soliloquies, broken dialogues, stage effects such as lighting, costumes, etc. The dramatist deforms the plot and depersonalizes the characters. The characters, events, and the scenes are as few as possible. The play is not divided into acts but into scenes. The photography of realism, the dramatic sequence of events, is abandoned for a stream of consciousness in terms of stage symbols, whereby the surface of life becomes disjoined, scattered as in a dream to suggest inner reality, which lies beneath the surface. Not concerned with externals, the dramatist explores the idea, the source of conduct, until reality becomes subconsciousness and character mere abstraction. Scenes are often brief. They sometimes succeed one another without time sequence. They have neither order nor unity, and they suggest as they alternate between reality and fantasy, between objective action and analysis, the disorderly, disconnected features of psychoanalysis. The delineation of the subconscious world, avoidance of time, sequence, and unity, the employment of symbols, and the stream of consciousness technique, and the depiction of action followed by analysis, and the juxtaposition of reality with dream are some of the devices which the expressionist dramatists are very fond of. These were used by Strindberg and have also become powerful tools of experiment in some of Eugene O'Niell's plays. Time and space are broken. Anything may happen. There are also distortions and exaggerations in expressing the abstract through the concrete. The play being a psychological study of Brutus Jones, his visions, dreams, and fears, and his consciousness is an attempt to show what is happening in his soul. Further, the use of symbols, its loose structure, the technique of interior monologue, blend of past and present, and the use of stage effects to express inner reality are some of the things that make the Ember Jones an expressionistic drama. Now, the play is a psychological study of Brutus Jones' mind, his fears, visions, and dreams. Tom is the part and parcel of the psychological action. At first, it is the call to war. Then it merges into the Ember Jones' vision of the slaves working to its beat. Finally, it becomes his own throbbing, feverish temples, and all the while it is our heart beating more and more rapidly as we follow his fate. Lastly, the tom-tom is a symbol of man's last heartbeat, death. The consciousness of Jones has been presented through the cinematographic technique of the flashback, fusing the past and present. Here, symbol and psychology merge, and the whole play is a long drama. Emperor Jones represents the breakdown of a negroid mentally under the stress of fear and fatigue. Brutus Jones was a bold and unscrupulous exploiter who could enter the forest alone, but gradually he became an abject figure as he was scared by the hallucinations. The hallucinations that appear to Brutus Jones during his wild flight in the forest are at first personal memories, then they become racial memories as he regresses deeper and deeper into his primitive past under the pressure of fear. The personal memories are of Jeff, the Pullman porter, whom he killed in a crap game, the chain gong from which he escaped, and the little formless fears. The racial memories are of the need of a southern slave auction in which he is for sale, a slave ship in which the Negroes are being brought from Africa, and finally of a Congo witch doctor who demands John's sacrifice. In an agitated state of brain, he shoots at each of the visions, and ultimately he is killed by the silver bullets fired by him. Thus, the play in the tradition of expressionistic plays is the mental study of the hero. The edge of the great forest is an extensive symbolization of both the glory and horror of his freedom, of both its terrifying patience and his sensuous isolation. The flight is from himself, and the imitated values of the white man are only a temporary defense against the unbearable reprisals of human freedom. Unknown forms of fears and terror emerge from the forest shades, and the power of blackness haunts him, injuring his pride and crippling his will. he descends through the successive levels of the superego, ego, and personal unconscious until descends into the darkling maelstrom of his racial unconscious, which and atavistic directness. Scene 2 to 7, which take place at night in the forest, are expressionistic, but in these fantasy scenes, the movement is straightforward. O'Neill writes with an eye on the cloak and the passing spiritual decay and regression of John's, at the end of which each scene is marked by John's firing a bullet. Indeed, there are as many bullets in his revolver as there are scenes. In each scene, some vision from his personal unconscious or his collective unconscious is presented, and the vision disappears as soon as the bullet is fired. Throughout the play, the sounds from John's revolver, like the tom-tom, have an important unifying function. They end each for a scene except one, the slave ship scene, where instead a similar effect is gained by John's voice rising to the highest pitch of sorrow and desolation as the scene ends. His veil is carried over. To the next scene, the Congo scene, thereby binding the two together. Similarly, the witch doctor's cries of furious exultation as the demands of John's sacrifice are echoed in the savage, exultant yells of the natives as they kill John's in the final scene. Here, the parallel sounds help to suggest the mysterious identity of John's with his killers. Now we have the use of the tom-tom. In the afternoon of the fateful day, the sound of the tom-tom is heard at the end of scene 1, coming from the distant hill, and Jones at once understands that his subjects are in revolt against him. He knows his game is up, and so he runs away from the palace according to the plan he has already formed. In the beginning, it's a low, vibrating sound, but soon it seems to grow rapidity and in intensity. In scene 3, the silence is broken, we are told, by the far-off quickened throb of the tom-tom. In scene 3, it seems to the terrified Jones that the sound of the drum is coming from some nearby place. They must have carried it along with them. The very thought is maddening to him. As Jones fires his revolver, the beat of the far-off tom-tom becomes perceptibly louder and more rapid. And in short, we can say that the Ember Jones is the greatest American expressionistic plays, the story of the flamboyant Negro enacted to the frenzy of tom-tom, the sustained monologue, and the rapidity shifting setting framed into the one single desperate action, were all unique features that made the play an instant success. Okay, with that we come to the end of the discussion, Expressionism in the play in the Ember Jones. And now that it's almost 11 o'clock, I just conclude today's lecture. I will, of course, go live tomorrow, and we will continue our discussion of this play tomorrow in the live streaming. Tomorrow we'll be just concluding the discussion of this play, the Ember Jones, and day after tomorrow we'll start the discussion of the poetry of Walt Whitman. Thanks a lot for listening. Happiness. May God bless you all. Be happy, hopeful, and have a lot of wonderful dreams. Good night, everybody.